Hi everyone, welcome back. Today I'm joined by Martin Dangerfield, who runs an embedded recruitment business. Hi Martin, thanks for joining us.
That was very good. Thank you. People probably don't know what embedded recruitment business is, do they? So thank you for having me. But also, just if anybody asks, it's about putting in-house recruitment people into your business. But also, we work a lot with small businesses about looking at hiring, how they hire, and lots of other things to help.
I know that lots of construction businesses are coming back now after the pandemic and trying to rebuild and recruit people. Bringing in the right people is so key to making sure that your business keeps the culture and the personality that you want to reflect. What sort of advice would you have for small businesses in their recruitment decisions?
Oh, wow. That's a big question, isn't it? Absolutely. Hiring people for your own business is so difficult. I think it's underestimated about I guess, the elements of why would they want to come and work for you as a small business. There's a great statistic is in the UK, there's about 6 million small businesses, and that goes up every year by about 400,000, something like that. If you actually look at it, it accounts for 16 to 17 million people work for a small business as opposed to a large business. So most of the time I always talk to people about hiring is to be authentic. It's that be who you are rather than pretending otherwise. So going about looking for people for you is really difficult. You know, we've got relatively low unemployment. It's not as high as we thought it would be at this time. We've also got loads and loads of vacancies. There's over 1 million vacancies in the UK, which is the highest number there have ever been. So going out in the big bad world and saying, I'm hiring, I want somebody, is incredibly difficult for most people. First of all, I would say just be really clear about what you want. Think about, why am I hiring this person? What will they do? How will they do it? And use the tools that are out there. You know, get out on the internet. Actually, the first thing I always suggest to small businesses is just go and Google the job. You know, what are you looking for? What would you see? It means you can see similar looking jobs. You get an idea of what other people are paying, because that's the most critical thing as well. You know, when we hire somebody, where if you're a business owner, you're paying out of your back pocket effectively to go and pay somebody. And it's always a huge value-based conversation, isn't it? And what am I going to get from you? Are you going to come and do a really good job for me? But probably not get too hung up about competing against big corporates or big organizations. People want to work for small businesses because they want to work for a small business. Awkwardly, and I was saying this about people who work for me, there's a tricky line there, isn't it? People come and work for the owner or the MD, and you can't get away from that. So there is also, I think, a sort of balancing off of an element of risk of joining a small business of, I really need to like the boss, because typically he or she's going to be the main person I talk to on a day-to-day basis. I don't know if that really helps, though. I don't. It's quite a big question to ask around how you go about it.
Sure. Are there mistakes that you see people make, or things that you think, ways that they could make life easier for themselves?
I think the people underestimate, either people think recruitment is incredibly easy or recruitment is incredibly hard. And that's whether you're a big company or a small company. There is a process. It's like a sales process, though, actually. And probably think about it in that context. So the one end, you've got the demand. Do people want this thing? So if I'm trying to think of a good small business in a role. If you're looking for an accountant for your business, for example, a bookkeeper or something, think about what are they looking for? What would that individual want from me? And start there. But then actually just map it out, what the process is likely to be. So if you're doing it yourself, typically you've probably seen an advert from something like Indeed, and you'll post a job, because you can do that really easily, and you'll get some responses. No matter what you post on Indeed, you will get something. And there's the first awkwardness. You will get all sorts of things. I spoke to a business owner not that long ago who was looking for an office manager in Manchester, and posted it on Indeed, and genuinely didn't expect to get the response that they got. And they got about 350 applicants in a week. So therein lies their problem. They actually didn't know what to do with that. How do you know, in that 350, there's a really great person? There's probably 7 great people, but actually finding the time to plow through them is really, really difficult. This is typically where some organizations immediately go to a recruitment agency to do that for them. And there's some strengths and weaknesses in that. Clearly, it costs you a lot of money. 15 to 20% of the salary is typically the norm. But against that, they've taken a lot of the headache away of sifting and screening and making sure that you've actually got some people that are the right people. You know, if I'm looking for a bookkeeper, I don't want somebody who's never done it before, for example. But some of that around that advertising and thinking about what you want also comes back to, yeah, think about what you really want, what's really important to you, and then have to think about what's important to the candidate. What are they looking for? Why us? You know, why they want to come and work here? Big organisations spend lots of money thinking about what they look like as an employer, but as a small business, just be authentic, be who you are. You know, people aren't expecting all bells and whistles; they're probably expecting some gaps. And actually, that can be a real strength as well. That's why I want to go and join a business, become part of it, and become important to that business to actually fix some things or help it grow or be better at bookkeeping, whatever it happens to be.
You mentioned there the number of vacancies that are out in the world at the moment, and yet the number of applications that some jobs get. Do you think that there's an advantage for employers in small businesses to be very, very specific about the kind of person that they want and to narrow things right down in this world of the great resignation that we're talking about at the moment, that 1 in 4 people are due to leave their jobs? Or do you think there's something more about perhaps being open to suggestions from potential workforce about what they might bring to a company?
It's so difficult, isn't it? We have, awkwardly for me, I think the answer is always depends. And we've talked about this before about, you know, if I was running a restaurant, I want somebody to come and cook food. Now I might want Gordon Ramsay, I want this amazing chef. And in my head, that's what my restaurant ultimately might have. But depending where in my life of my restaurant is, I probably want somebody a bit more rounded, who isn't the chef, isn't this whatever. They can do different things. They can, you know, can make a decent risotto, and they're not afraid to make a bacon sandwich, and don't see that as being beneath them, but actually contribute something. And I think that's so hard for some roles, those less obvious roles with skills. There's a bunch of things that need skills, and in construction there's loads of those roles that need specific skills. You need to have done that skill, be trained in that skill, demonstrate you can do it. But a lot of back office elements. If I think about, you know, my first job was working in a supermarket, managing the people behind the till and talking to customers and having to do some other things. Well, nobody really teaches you that. You can do that sort of on the job training, but most of that's about attitude and approach. And there are still a lot of jobs in most companies that certainly at that entry level, attitude and approach are going to win the day. The challenge with that, if you've got a CV, how do you tell attitude and approach in the CV? Which means you now got to spend a lot more time talking to people. And therein lies another problem. You know, inherently, when people go and recruit, they forget they've actually got to go and talk to somebody, and hate that experience. The big resignation and the vacancies does cause problems to that, both of those sides. So loads of applicants applying for new work. Equally, some of those applicants have applied because of Indeed and the other job boards. They've applied for 50 or 60 jobs that day. So they won't remember you or your job. And so the response rate is actually lower than you think. So while somebody's applied for a job with you, then getting back in touch to say, hey, you look interesting, come and have a chat, doesn't, you know, the success rate of that's actually a lot lower than it used to be. I haven't got the stats. I wish I had some magic stats that said, you know, 80% stop doing it. But certainly from my perspective, when I go recruit for me, I know that I'm going to be stood up on a Zoom call. I'm going to not get anybody back to me, even if I respond really, really quickly. I would say that's one of the things. If you are hiring, you've got to make it awkwardly the top of your page every day for a little bit, so that you are responding to people, you are getting them in your diary to have a conversation. Because if you're not, then somebody else is. And if you see somebody that remotely looks like what you're looking for, you should move super quickly. And that comes with making a decision as well, which is also tricky for most small businesses, that you go, actually, I'm going to hire somebody now. That's great. But you need to get with it quite quickly. There's lots of opportunity out there. The magic number is, yes, 1.1 million vacancies. So there's no shortage of work. Admittedly, not all of the vacancies are in all of the work, are they? You know, I do a lot of work with IT technology companies. There's not an awful lot of software engineer mapping of supply and demand into there. There's a lot of vacancies. It doesn't mean that we've got any more software engineers than we had 2 years ago. Equally, I was talking to a well-known coffee chain, looking for people to join them in their stores, and they've got thousands of stores across Europe, and they're really struggling just to get people in through the door for what are quite obvious, you know, relatively low skilled, get up and running, can start today, I can start paying you straight away, you get a uniform, you get free coffee. And they're struggling as well to get those sort of jobs in through the door as well. So it's really tough right now. And I said that's probably the bleak picture that says it's really tough. but be yourself, be who you are. You can't undo that, because somebody will also rumble you quite quickly. If you're somebody different in the hiring process than you eventually become as an employer, then they're going to leave you, because they can. And certainly, again, depending on where those roles are, entry level and up, there's opportunities everywhere you go.
And in those small businesses, people will find that out very quickly, whereas in bigger businesses, perhaps it can be, you can make a place for yourself there. And
it works in both ways. It's funny, again, some of the work I've done in big corporates, I won't name names, obviously, but I did some work a couple of years ago with somebody, and their attrition, so 30% of the people that they hired would leave in the first 3 months. They're a large organization. And that was because, again, they weren't authentic. They just missed the trick. They'd done a very hard sell of, aren't we amazing? There's lots of videos and lots of Instagram stuff. It's all lovely. The reality was something slightly different, that would actually be sat in a very dull looking cubicle, staring at 3 screens and reading an Excel spreadsheet. Doesn't sound so exciting though, doesn't it? You don't hire people with like come look at Excel spreadsheets all day, even if that's the reality though. And I think that's the thing about, again, being clear about what you are and what you're not. I think you'll find your people if you're clear about, we're not this thing. We're not, in my case, they're not Google or Apple. You're something different, and knowing that you're different, it makes it that conversation that much easier. So we haven't overpromised, so we can't underdeliver because of that. Be clear. Like I said earlier, be clear about the gaps in the organisation. To say, well, we haven't got this, or we haven't got that. I can promise to pay you on time. That's probably what I'm going to commit to for the first month. Your training and career progression won't necessarily be clear. But equally, people are excited by joining companies like that because they want to come and do, as you say, make their mark and maybe build something that isn't there yet, that isn't quite defined, and they can grow with the company. I think the other thing for most people, I said this to somebody, a big employer the other day, people used to think about not jobs for life, but at least jobs for a chunk of time. And those days are gone, that people will come to you for a period of time that suits them and either move within the company into something different or leave you. And you've got to acknowledge that that's the case. At some point, whoever you've hired, they're going to leave you one day. That doesn't mean you should be sort of watching them from the door, but they will go. Or they'll ask for more money and you can't afford them anymore, because that's also a factor. So we've got huge wage inflation across many jobs. I, as an employer, can't afford to hang on to people forever. We can't almost, we have to pay competitively. You need to sell them the whole package. It's like, I'm not this big corporate, I'm something different, which means actually you're not going to earn as much as they can afford right now. Certainly in certain sectors, and certainly mine in recruitment, salaries have gone up. So it makes it easier to have that conversation, say, just come and work for me, I'll pay you 20% more, 30% more. It's quite common now as well.
For people who are going through the recruitment process and trying to bring in the right people to their business, I know this is probably really hard to estimate, but is there a certain amount of time people should anticipate being able to commit to recruiting, bringing in the right person to the organization? Is there a best practice guideline for what that might be?
Awkwardly, again, it depends. It depends what you're hiring. It depends what you do and what you're hiring. So, going back to that coffee shop, if I ran a coffee shop, and I met somebody I liked, I can hire them kind of on the spot almost. I can get on with it and do it. It's my business. Here's a contract. Let's do that. If you're after something more complex, it does depend on how competitive your market is, and what you think. I mean, I often think if you advertise a job in any way, so I said put it on Indeed or somebody else, whatever, you'll know pretty early on by the initial response rate almost how much time it's going to take you. Professional recruiters, I use that word euphemistically, take 7 seconds to read a CV. That's still the de facto bunch of data out there that sort of says it's actually 6.8 seconds or something. And that's because that's what they do. They do that all day in, day out. Downside with that sometimes, of course, they miss things. But if you're a recruiter just doing their job, they're picking out the key information. It's like anything you do on a repetitive basis, you just get quicker at it. If you're owning a business and you're running your business, spend a bit more time than that, because you do want to pick out the nuances. I think that one of the things actually that's come about, particularly because of COVID, is people used to shy away from job hoppers. but there's a lot more job hoppers out there now, and they've been job hopping because they've been forced into it. But they've been working in an organisation, they've been furloughed, they've been fired, they've gone to another one, and that hasn't worked out either because of COVID. So they're just, give them the benefit of the doubt and just say, except they're just trying to earn a wage rather than there's actually something wrong with them. Equally, be mindful of was there something there that didn't work though? Is it just COVID, or was it just something that didn't work? Is there a real reason for them leaving? Don't suspect it's always the candidate though. It's often the organisation they've joined. None of us are perfect. I always say this, come work for me. You have to come work for me, which is sometimes obviously a marvellous thing, and sometimes it's a pain in the arse, and we all know that. But the time set aside, I said, I always say, just take it seriously. It's not an on the side job. There are days when you actually really need to focus. I tend to, and maybe it's my recruitment, I tend to think, you sort of define what you want, get some advertising, get some people in, set some time aside, hours at a time to go, actually, I'm going to spend an hour reading those CVs. If nothing else, that'll educate you on what you're seeing, either that you're attracting the wrong thing, in which case you probably need to change what you're saying about the role. It's not clear, or you are attracting the right thing, in which case just get on with it. And then some of that process, I guess the time is also about who needs to see people. If you're the MD who makes all the decisions, is there a team? How big are you? Who else needs to see that person? Don't be afraid to encourage candidates to say, have you got somebody else I can talk to? As a small business, it's a challenge. Hiring, give me a reference, give me somebody I can just talk to. That's often a slightly difficult conversation. People are steered away from references for fear of being taken to court for something they've said. But just try and keep it almost, who can I talk to that's going to tell me you haven't got two heads and you're not an axe murderer? But think about it in those process terms. Do I need to spend an hour with somebody to get to know them, for them to get to know me? Is that enough? Or do I need to split that up into chunks? Most corporates, if I look at them, still work on a sort of 2 or 3 step process. They do a screening call with a recruiter. It's a 30-minute screening call. They do a 45-minute call with somebody else and a 45-minute call with somebody else. So in total, we're looking at 120 minutes of time, so 2 hours of time. I'm never sure if that's enough. Either way, actually, I don't know if I'm a candidate. I don't know if I've got enough of a story about who you are and what you are, and that's difficult. I haven't seen much of it. There was a couple of small companies recently doing that sort of try before you buy on both sides, and literally, come and spend a day here. We'll pay you for the day. Come and work here for a day. So we think. I quite like that idea, but I also feel that doesn't sit very well with every candidate telling your current boss, if you got one, I'm off for the day. And work over the road or something. It doesn't quite work out. And I said I could see it being misused as well, maybe because I work in recruitment, that devious thing of so come and work for the day, just give me access to your database, let's see what we find. And that day I could do a lot of damage and find lots of information. But I think there's no set time. It's as long as the candidate needs to say yes. And that's a slightly different thing to pushing candidates down a rabbit hole of you will do this. I think it's expected in a corporate world. I think when you're hiring for yourself, I think you're allowed to be a lot more flexible about time and just getting to know someone, because you said it's that much more important. If you're a one person business, you hire somebody else, you've doubled. But even if you're a 10-person business, you've hired somebody else, it's another 10% you've added. It's a big deal still. I don't think that you ever really get away from that until you. I don't know. I don't actually know where the point is. I never got there. I don't know if it's 50 or 100 people, you suddenly change. I don't know.
Finally, what sort of guidance would you give to people in terms of keeping their brand, keeping their personality, keeping their values as a business, if somebody isn't right for you as an employee?
Ooh, that's tricky, isn't it? Yeah, so big corporates, again, spend lots of money on employer brand, defining who they are, the values they've got, how they can communicate, and all the rest of it. And I think people get a bit scared by that. Some of the large organizations we name, they've got a particular style and approach. I think relating it back to what I said earlier about being sort of authentic and keeping to who you are is really important. So first of all, there's loads of things you can do to promote your business. So yeah, I've talked about job advertising, but make sure your website's nice, and don't underestimate the power of Instagram and Twitter and all those other good things. Don't underestimate the power of your network. As in, I'm hiring this, do you know anyone? There's always somebody will know somebody will know somebody. But you're right, not everybody gets recruited or gets hired. In again, my experience, it's a roughly 10 to 1, which means we'll meet 10 people and we'll hire one of them. Some big corporates have got it down to about 8 to 1, but it's still that number. So you've got an awful lot of rejection. So recruitment is actually about rejection. So for me, it's about being clear that actually this isn't going to work. Be really honest. Don't attack the person. Typically attack the skill, obviously, and say, this is what I need in this business, and you haven't got this skill, this demonstrable skill. Please avoid, you haven't got this number of years of experience. That's a real red flag and suggests that you're discriminating against them in some way. I always say that people think it's reasonable, but it's sort of gone away. You have to be really clear about things. But yeah, be clear about why they shouldn't do that. But then genuinely say, but I really like you. I just think you're not right for the organisation now, today. Let's keep in touch. You add them to your own. If you've got a CRM or a marketing tool that you're already using to attract clients, add them to that. Just say, look, I'm going to keep you in there so you can see what we're up to, and encourage them to come back to you when they see something interesting. And I think for me, that's something that's merged a little bit. That the sales and marketing activity you do as your business and come and work here aren't a million miles away. Got a pen in my hand. Come and buy this pen is one message, but come and work in a company that makes these pens is not. It's not too far, and a lot of the content can be the same. So think about any of the content you do create or anything you do in sales marketing, just apply it to the candidate piece as well. Do ask their permission. Obviously, get them to register like you would like a subscriber to your email, and that's probably the best bet. Use something like MailChimp or whatever you use. But do that to at least keep an ongoing conversation. I don't think most small businesses are recruiting empires. You're not hiring somebody every minute. But it's super helpful to have somebody you can go back to, because otherwise we just forget that we met somebody. So don't be afraid to do a little bit of hiring. And that piece as well, your clients can often be a really good source of referrals. Not your clients to go and poach to them, but your clients will know somebody that they think would be good for you because they know your business already. And they want you to succeed, so they might actually be able to introduce somebody as well. So never be afraid to ask a sort of broader network of, do you know anyone? That's actually really quite a useful piece. And one day I'm perhaps tell you about that's how recruiters actually do it. They ask, they're going to approach a candidate and say, well, do you know anyone who could do this? Obviously knowing full well it's you. But another conversation for another day.
Thank you so much for that insight into the world of recruiters. Thanks for joining us, Martin.
No problem at all. Thank you for having me.